After 2 weeks of use, it is finally time to decide if the iPad Pro really is a pro device. Welcome everyone, it is Andrew here from AppleInsider, and this is our review of the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. There have been copious reviews of the new iPads already hitting the web, so instead of just reiterating a laundry list of specs that shows why the new iPad Pro is powerful, we decided to take Apple's word that this is a pro device and drop it into a professional workflow and see how it actually holds up and if it's worth it over the last generation iPad 12.9-inch. There are many definitions of what it means to be a professional and what it means to be a professional device, but we're looking at it in the context of our workflow. So a media professional working on writing, photo sessions, video shoots, all of that, and how we can actually use the iPad Pro. We're going from the last generation 12.9-inch, so we already had this heavily involved in our workflow, but we want to see how much more we can move over to the iPad from our computers. We're not necessarily trying to replace our computers, but trying to see where the iPad naturally fits, where it excels, where it's lacking, and where it could do more. Coming from that last generation iPad, we immediately noticed a difference in the size, in a good way. The size difference on the 12-inch is much more substantial than it is on the 11. You can see here just the difference in the footprint. Yes, the new one is a little bit thinner, but that's really kind of secondary. The reduction in the width and the height are really what make this a killer device. We do appreciate Apple's efforts in shrinking this down, making it thinner, making it lighter, but it's really those physical dimensions that made all the difference to us. Made it easier to carry around, easier to throw in our bag, easier to use as a second monitor. So many scenarios, just that size difference made an impact. Looking at the hardware, the slimmed down bezels really put the display front and center and don't cause any issues holding or handling the device as we had worried pre-release. Apple has dubbed the new display a liquid retina display. That's the same moniker given to the iPhone XR's glass, but don't let that comparison worry you, as this is certainly the most advanced LCD Apple's ever put out, packing away a few tricks still not even seen on the iPhone. That liquid retina designation comes by way of the rounded corners, which does allow the bezels to get smaller and the display to mimic the curves of the body. This is a subtle effect but goes a long way in making the display feel more immersive. The downside, though, is that because of the new aspect ratio, developers once more need to update their apps to rid them of the black bars surrounding. Many key players here have already submitted their requisite updates, but it could be a while before your entire catalog of apps adopts. On the 12.9-inch model, this isn't nearly as noticeable, but we're sure our 11-inch brethren have stronger opinions with much less screen real estate to give up. The new display also packs in tap to wake functionality for the first time on iPad, which makes a big difference with no home button in sight. A lot easier than trying to search for the power button around one of these edges. Speaking of that lack of home button, we are in love with Face ID. Face ID makes a huge difference and it's better on the iPad than it is on the iPhone. It works from any angle no matter which way you rotate your iPad, and it happens seamlessly in the background. Go to log in somewhere, just tap on login, the camera automatically scans and gets you into place. Sure, sometimes our thumb ends up covering the camera, but it's not a big deal just to move it. And if we're using our keyboard, it's even better because you don't have to raise your hands up to authenticate with Touch ID. Kind of leave them in place. Go to the page, automatically scans your face, and you're on the way. And in our workflow, we had a couple people who needed to use our iPad. It's a shared device, and luckily Face ID has that alternate appearance ability, so someone else can also get in without having to type in the long passcode. Touch ID had 5 authentication options, 5 different fingers that could be input, so we're sure some people may have issues limiting it on that, but for our workflow, it worked just fine. The biggest thing we did on our iPad was type. We wrote everything, including this review, on the iPad. To do so, of course we used the new Smart Keyboard Folio, which has risen in price $20 from the Smart Keyboard in the past. It's gotten a subtle redesign to make it a little bit easier to use and to take into consideration the relocated Smart Connector. It also includes back protection, which is what makes it a folio rather than just the Smart Keyboard. It's a smart device, it's easy to attach, and generally we like it, but we do have some qualms over it over the last generation. There's definitely some digs we have at it, including the way you lose some functionality, and you have that added weight and thickness of the back protection if you don't really want it. But when it comes to what's most important, typing, we're definitely fans. Especially when it comes to the 11-inch versus the 12-inch model. The 12-inch is so much more convenient to type on because it includes a full-size keyboard compared to the smaller 11-inch. It has the same fabric keys as in the past, and overall, we still enjoy typing on it. Going from our Mac to the new iPad Pro, we really don't notice much of a difference. We can still type as quick and as accurately on our 12.9-inch iPad Pro as we can on our MacBook Pro. The keys feel very similar, other than the material and the amount of clickiness that comes out of them, but we're very fast on this keyboard, which is important when we're actually writing a story. We do wish Apple would maybe include those function keys, especially on the larger 12.9-inch model. I would have liked the option to change the volume or change the brightness by using the actual function keys on the keyboard that you get with third-party options. But either way, I'm still very glad that the full-size keyboard stays on the shrunken down 12.9-inch model. Another aspect you can count us huge fans of when integrating the new iPad Pro into our workflow was USB-C. It made a huge difference whether we were hitting the road for a photo shoot, in the office, or even just traveling for a conference. USB-C, while still limited by iOS, was extremely powerful and a pleasure to have. We could connect monitors, we can connect our cameras, charge everything over the same cable we use for our MacBook. It is pretty amazing to use. We actually liked using our iPad Pro with a 4K monitor. It was kind of handy. We were working in iMovie a little bit, editing some short videos, and it was great to see actual uncompressed 4K live preview coming out of our iPad while we edited on our iPad screen. The downside is there's not a lot you can do with these external monitors. Only some apps use the external monitor for anything other than just mirroring what's on your iPad. We could definitely get used to this if more apps add features to it, or if Apple adds additional functionality next year with iOS 13. So walking you through a little bit of our workflow of how we use the new iPad Pro. We first created a shot list and an outline of our review. We then used our iPad as a teleprompter and a note sheet as we actually filmed the review. We took a lot of photos in that process of the devices, and then we imported those to our iPads for editing, processing, and resizing. We then went back to our iPad Pro and did all of our additional writing and formatting of the full review. While it's really nice to be able to plug our camera directly into our iPad, no adapters or weird cables necessary, there's still limitations in iOS. For instance, when we bring in those photos and videos, they have to go through the camera roll first. I can't drop them directly into Files or Affinity Photo. So my workflow ended up being plug in camera, import them into Photos, open them up inside of Affinity Photo, edit them, do everything else, and then export them back out into the Files app where they would get renamed and resized before uploading into the AppleInsider publishing platform. If these are my own personal items, then it's not a big deal. I don't mind having to throw things into my own photo roll. But when I'm out there doing a client's photo shoot, I don't really want to have to bring all those photos into my own personal photo roll before having to remove them, unless I just want a bunch of duplicates or client photos in my own personal photos. That's a big problem for me, so I hope that's something that Apple considers as they work on new versions of iOS and iPad functionality. I've spent a lot of time in the past 2 weeks using the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch model. For me, there's no comparison. For really getting work done, I needed that 12.9-inch. The 11 was just too small and too cramped, especially when it comes to multitasking. I was able to pull up a story on one side, be writing on the other, and slide over stuff like my Twitter feed or my email to get into. Doing all of that on an 11-inch screen was pretty much a non-starter. It was way too cramped, everything was way too small. But on the iPad Pro 12.9-inch, it was not a problem at all. It was very easy and intuitive to use, once you at least knew all of the gestures required to get there. All that brings us back to the fundamental question. Is the iPad Pro a real pro device? And for the 12.9-inch, we have to say yes. The speed is unparalleled and made a noticeable difference when dealing with videos and photos on our device. Face ID was magical and left us uninterrupted when we're actually trying to get some work done. The new Apple Pencil, while we didn't use it for writing, we certainly used it for an interface with editing photos, and it makes a big difference, and we can't wait for more apps to add that additional functionality for the gestures to switch between tools. And USB-C simplified our workflow, reduced the amount of gear we had to take around, and overall just streamlined our processes. The problem with iPad Pro is that Apple doesn't release any new software to go alongside. iOS 12 ships when the new iPhone came out, but with the iPad Pro, that was 2 months ago. So we have to wait an entire year to see the full realization with iOS 13. This iPad runs the same software as the old iPad, which makes it feel a little bit older than it actually is. The potential is there, and the new iPad Pro does make significant inroads into simplifying our professional workflow. No, it doesn't replace our computer, but at least right now, it isn't meant to. Professionals don't always have to have one machine. If we switched today to the iPad Pro and ditched our MacBook, we'd still wind up with a Mac Mini running in the background as a media server. Whether it's meant to replace PCs or not is a different question, but it doesn't mean that iOS and the iPad Pro can't fulfill the potential it already has. The iPad Pro has room to grow, and it undoubtedly will. This iPad Pro feels like the most polished iPad yet and was worth our upgrade, but we will still be here patiently waiting for third-party apps to tap into that unbridled power and for Apple to finally focus on new features and Pro functionality with iOS 13.
If you enjoyed this video, like it and hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our price guide, which makes it extremely easy to find the best deals on Apple products updated daily. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you in the next video.